Torah Or, page 86, second column. Okay, the Alter Rebbe is asking a question. Why is it that the Mishkan was made out of wood and goatskin and the Beis HaMikdash was made out of stone? So he starts explaining that the lower the thing, the higher it is. So inanimate, plant, animal, and human. So according to the laws of nature, so to speak, so human is higher than animal, which is higher than plant, which is higher than inanimate. But in the source, inanimate is higher. Therefore, in the Beis HaMikdash, which is a greater level than the Mishkan, it revealed the way it is in the source. And in the source, that's where it is. So he says like this. Okay, let's start in the second column, like 15 lines in the top of the Parsha. So he says, in the Mishkan was based according to the laws of the Shtalshalos. But the Beis HaMikdash had the ultimate completeness. Which was a permanent home of Hashem. Like it says, this is my permanent home, which is similar to the level of Elam Haba. What will be in Elef Hashvi? Not Olam Haba of Gan Eden, but Olam Haba of Mashiach. Then the lower level of inanimate, earth, will be elevated, which is the level of Malchus of Atzilus. Yes, the Ma'alim Mekulna is going to be greater than all of them. In other words, when the source is revealed, the lowest is the highest. The woman of valor, which is the level of Malchus, becomes the crown of the husband. That Malchus becomes the crown of Zah. In other words, by the way, just think you have Daimim Smer Chai Medaber, you have 4 letters of Hashem's name, you have 4 worlds, you have Chochmah, Bina, Zah, and Malchus. So Chochmah and Bina are the 2 higher ones, Zah and Malchus is the lowest, but Lasalov and Malchus is going to be the greatest. V'hainu mitzad shosh, she'osa b'machshava akduma. Tchila eretz kadma l'shamayim, the level of eretz higher than Shamayim. L'chein av b'beis HaMikdash.
What is the Malchus going to feed on?
Malchus is the level of Afar and Daimon.
What is it going to feed on? Because like this, the whole time
it's going to feed on even higher. L'chein av b'beis HaMikdash. Shoyamein olam haba. Therefore, Beis HaMikdash, which is similar to Olam Haba, the primary building was from stone and dirt, which is a level of Daimim, even Agag V'Maziva, even the roof. Makif was also Avonim Me'ofer, and not Ma'arozim, which is Kfi Mashiach Losulav, Shebechinas Eretz Koben, Shizchayal Terzbal Mitzat Shosha. He says, but they had klunis shel eres. They had these beams in the Beis HaMikdash. They had the beams of the cedar tree. With only the support beams for the roof. Okay. So bottom line is the difference between Mishkan and Beis HaMikdash. Mishkan is a level of Elokus now. Beis HaMikdash is a level of Elokus the way it's going to be L'Osalavei. Therefore, everything is stone and dirt because that's a higher level. So he says now at the bottom of 86, we see clearly the level that there is in the ground, a greater advantage even over the higher things. Why? Which is the level of bittul, Tachas kapes ragli hakel, which is the stepping stone of you step on earth. It's the lowest. But on the other hand, plant life, trees, and those things you don't step on. And he says this bittul that offered has nimsha mitzat shorsha Hanayla comes from the higher source. But machshava shemachshava b'chinas cheshiv ma. Machshava is two words. Choshav ma. Right? The first and last letter is ma, and the rest is choshav. What is choshav ma? Ma is the tachlis habittul. Next page, Mem Dalim. The K'mesha Rabbeinu said v'nachnu ma. So ma is a level of bittul. What is choshav ma? Misham nimshachum islavish v'chinas habittul ba'aretz. And that's the level of bittul that comes from the earth. In other words, like this. In machshava we said, aretz is first. In dibur, shamayim is first. Why is but aretz is higher than the rest? Because of the bittul. That's why it's created with machshava. Machshava is choshav ma. Mitzazet is talo losulove. Li'esateres baila. To be the higher level, therefore the Beis Hamikdash was made out of stone. Okay, skip the parentheses. On the other hand, the Mishkan, which is made on the level of Kedusha now. Over there, the top of the Mishkan was animal skins, then the walls were plant, and then the earth was the floor. So then, Shemayim Kadmu, Shemayim is first. Therefore, the ceiling was made out of goat skins, and then the walls were made out of tzemeach, and then the earth was the lowest. Okay? So now the Alter Rebbe is coming back to the Parsha, because at the beginning, the Alter Rebbe the Maamarim began Vayigash of Yehuda. So now the Alter Rebbe is going to explain that these two levels, Shemayim and Oretz, now is the level of Beis Hamikdash and Mishkan. That's why it's interesting. The Mishkan Shilei, was in the Chelik of Yosef. The Beis Hamikdash was in the Chelik of Binyamin, but Yehuda and Binyamin was one general area. So the Beis Hamikdash actually is in the Chelik of Yehuda. I mean, of the two, it's Binyamin. But when you had the 10 tribes and the 12 tribes, so Yehuda and Binyamin were the two tribes that stayed together. So therefore, it's really it's called, generally speaking, Yehuda. But that's exactly the same thing. Yosef is a level of Hisafa adding. That's the level of, like we discussed last night, the level of nature that you can add to. And Yehuda is the level of Bittul. And that's the difference. Alter Rebbe is going to explain why now Yehuda came to Yosef. Because Yosef is greater now. La'asad Lavei, Yosef is going to come to Yehuda because Yehuda is greater. And that's all interconnected here. Mine, Zeu, God, what?
In the Haftorah.
Yeah.
The Haftorah is reversed.
The Haftorah that we will be reading this week is reversed. That Yehuda, now Yehuda came to Yosef. La'asad Lavei, Yosef is going to come to Yehuda. Because now, Yosef is greater. Eventually, Yehuda is going to be greater. V'zeu gam ke'in Yosef Yehuda. Shugam ke'in b'chinas madrega shamayim v'oretz, which is a level of shamayim and oretz. It's tzemech v'daimen. Again, tzemech means it constantly grows. Yosef means heisafa, constantly growing. So Yosef is the level of tzemech. Yehuda is the level of bittul. That's offered. Ki Yosef lashon teises v'riboy. Which keeps growing and growing more and more, and that's the level of tzemeach, especially the eres shegadal v'helach l'mayla mayla b'ramamayla, the eres tree, which is the tallest of all trees. Yeah, and that's the level tzaddik atama yifrach. A tzaddik is going to grow like a keres balvan and yizke, because. And Yosef is the level of tzaddik. We say Yosef at tzaddik. Because Yosef at tzaddik is a level of erez that continues to grow. Which is called daimon. And therefore he says, Midas which is the level of Yosef, which is Zah, and the primary level of Midas is the last one Yesod, before Malchus, which is Tzadik Yesod Elam, which is the level of Yosef HaTzadik. So Yosef is the level of Midas. Now the emotions of a person constantly change. You're young, you have this type of likes. You get old, you have different types of likes. So Midas are constantly changing. He says, but letters are the level of diamond. Letters themselves don't mean anything.
There are people who have thousands of questions about Yiddishkeit and they constantly want to add to their knowledge.
No.
And then there are people who are brought to Hashem, the Emunah Pshuta.
Correct.
Which one is higher?
The Emunah Pshuta is higher. So, but ideally, that's what I'm saying, ideally it's supposed to be both together, Nasa and Nishma. It can't just be Nasa, it has to be Nasa and Nishma. In other words, the fundamental aspect is Emunah regardless. Whether I know or not, it doesn't matter, I'm doing it. Now the Torah says, understand.
Ultimately, Mashiach is from Bitul.
Huh?
Ultimately, Mashiach is from Bitul.
Mashiach is the level of ultimate Bitul. Yet Mashiach is going to teach Torah.
Rabbi, I find that the more in pursuit of intellectual growth,
Louder.
in pursuit of intellectual growth, we push aside the Emunah Pshuta. Somehow the Emunah Pshuta loses its zeal.
When Shlomo Melech writes, Pesi Yamin L'chol Dover, a fool believes everything. And the Medrash says, who is this fool that believes everything? Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what the Medrash says. The question, Moshe Rabbeinu is Chochmah Vatzilus, the highest level of Chochmah. What do you mean Moshe Rabbeinu is the fool that believes everything? Because the ultimate wisdom must be founded, in the foundation of it has to be Emunah. Because otherwise, your intellect can take you who knows where, warped, way off track. So in order to keep the Seichel where it belongs, you need the foundation of Emunah. And he said, there should cause added Bavon Yizke. Yosef is the level Yesod. She'elad das v'das elad kes she'mavriach ma'il. Okay, so Yehuda, who became his edit. Yeah, Yehuda is the level of Eretz, Malchus of Atzilus, which is Daimim of Atzilus, the level of Bittul. L'chein Yehuda Loshin Heidor Bittul. Shad Daimim Yesh Be'B'chinas Bittul Yosef. Daimim, because there's no growth in it, there's no nothing in it. So again, Yosef represents plant life, Yehuda represents inanimate, Bittul. So therefore, now the Alter Rebbe is going to say, in this world, Yosef is greater because Sameach, plant, is higher than inanimate. But in the source, inanimate is higher. That means eventually Yehuda is going to be higher, not Yosef. Say the Ishtalshalasata. Now in Ishtalshalas, Yosef will Lamaila mi Yehuda. Yosef is higher than Yehuda because now Malchus gets everything from above it. But Malchus has nothing of its own. Lasla megamor klum, has nothing of its own. It just gets from the higher levels. So now Yosef is l'mal mishaya Malchus mikabel shifa v'chayusim min zah. Therefore, Yosef was the king of Mitzrayim, which is a level of Tzemeach. Gidol v'snasus v'huaya mashpe v'amashpia l'kulam. In other words, like this. Remember, father gives, woman receives. Zah gives, Malchus receives. So Yosef is Zah, Yehuda is Malchus. So in this world, who's sustaining everybody? Yosef sustained. He gave food to everybody. So Yosef is really the level of Mashpia, Zah. The Yehuda Mekap, because that's what the Pasuk says. Vayilakid Elav Yehuda, Vayigash Elav Yehuda, Vayeme Biadeni. What does that mean? It's interesting when you learn according to Chassidus, the pasuk says like this: Vayigash Elav Yehuda, Yehuda came closer, and he said, "Vayemer bi'adeni." Bi'adeni means, "Please, my master." So he said, but really bi'adeni means in me. So he said, that's what we just said. Yehuda sustains Yosef. I'm sorry. Now Yosef sustains Yehuda. So he says, be into me, Adoni, you're mashpia me.
Right.
Or like this, that's yeshiva language. You're mashpia to me.
Right.
So that's what he says. Shepira, shebayim, shechashefa me Yosef atzadik. Kemavur besayad, Vayigash lakum takruv da alma. Mentioned this last night. That Vayigash Elav Yehuda means, the Zohar says, the world of Yehuda and Yosef became one. He came close to one another. Hainu alma tata, the lower world, which is Malchus, Misyached, the singing Geshes, Lama Ilah, the Zal, the Kabul HaShefa. So Yehuda, Malchus, is going to Yosef to receive the sustenance that Zal gives Malchus. That's the way it was in the Mishkan. Inanimate is higher than, plant is higher than inanimate. Yosef is higher than Yehuda. So now Yehuda has to get sustenance from Yosef. Then Yehuda is going to be higher. Like it says, which comes from the level of machshava, which is higher than dibur. Like he said before, machshava is choshev ma, the level of bittul. Which is the level of bittul. Abba, meaning Chochma, creates the daughter. Ki Chochma Eloi Nikra Yira Ilah. And Chochma Tata is Malchus. V'zel Abba Yisod Brata. Therefore, it says in Kabbalah, you mean like this. Chochma is the higher level of Yira. Malchus is the lower level of Yira. So now Abba Yosid Brata means the father, Chochma, created the daughter, which is Malchus. Again, Chochma being his father and mother. Zar Malchus, his son and daughter. Right? It's masculine and feminine. So he says, Shemachin is Yirila the Chochma, from the level of Yira of Chochma, that's the way it comes into Yira Tata, into Malchus. Ubad Lasid Lavai, Tisala Yira Tata, Be Yira Ilah, Mekeda, and then Yira, the lower level of Yira is going to even be greater than the higher level of Yira. The Midas, because Bittul is a higher level. The Midas, that comes from Chesed and Gevurah of Zah. Okay, so that's what the Rebbe is saying. In other words, let me elaborate on this a little bit. It says, Imein Chochma in Yira, Imein Yira in Chochma. You have a different level of Bittul. Okay? You have a bittul, it's called bittul ayesh. Bittul ayesh means master and slave. Okay? Boss and worker. The master tells the slave to do something. The slave doesn't want to do it. But the master is the boss, he'll do it anyway. Okay? That means I do have my opinion. I'm a yesh. I do have my feelings. But I give it up for the master. The worker doesn't want to do something. The boss tells him to do it. He has no choice. Nowadays, they don't listen anyway. But normal. You have to do it. That's called bittul ayesh. Eved pashut. Now, there's the higher level of bittul. I am so one with my boss. I am so one with my master. What he wants, I want. What he wants is automatic. I have no will of my own. What he wants is what I want. Now, which bittul is greater?
The second.
The first one.
What scholars we have over here? You're both right. Level-wise, complete bittul to the master is a much greater level than I have my own will and I give it up. But in bittul, where is a greater subservience? The first one. I have my own will and yet I give it up to you.
Right.
Once I'm one with you, it's not a great bittul because if you want it, I want it. That's the difference really between a tzaddik and a beinoni. A tzaddik is one thing with Hashem.
Goody.
Yeah, so whatever Hashem wants, he wants. So yes, he's a higher level of bittul, to such an extent that he doesn't exist, only God exists. But a beinoni that wants to sin and doesn't, because he has a Yetzirah, that's a much higher level of bittul. Okay? So now, the ultimate level is a low, that's what now Rebbe is saying over here. One second, here. The audit has more bittul, because bittul ayesh is a much greater level of bittul. So therefore, audits, which represents the physical, step down, the lowest, versus shamayim, which represents the holy things. So now, heaven is higher than earth. And that's why in practical creation now, that like we learned before, Bereshit bara Elokim, Esa Shemayim, that's audit. First heaven, and then earth. Because heaven is higher than earth. Plant is higher than inanimate. But eventually, like this, at the end of the Parsha, it says, the end of that section, it said, B'yayim aseis Hashem Elokim, added to Shemayim, added first. And we said before, because in purpose, audits is really higher. And that's going to be revealed when Mashiach comes. So Mashiach's coming is a revelation of the source, where the inanimate is higher than everything else. Okay. That's the level of Yosef versus Yehuda. Yosef is bittul ayesh. I'm sorry. Yosef is bittul b'metzias, and Yehuda is bittul ayesh. But la'asad lave, it's going to be a greater bittul of Yehuda, because bittul-wise, in the act of bittul, that's why Dr. Rebbe asked in Tanya the question, why in the world did Hashem send down a beinoni to the world if he fights and never wins? He can never become a tzaddik. To become a tzaddik, you have to be born with the ability to become a tzaddik. Now this beinoni, your whole life is going to fight, and never win. What's the purpose of it? So the Alter Rebbe explains the two delicacies, Aseli Matamim, that Rivka said to Yaakov, bring me the thing to get the brachos, right? I'll make delicacies. So Chassidus asked, Yitzchok needed two delicacies. One's not enough for him. He's a tzaddik. The obvious. So Chassidus explains, there's two delicacies by Hashem. When Rivka and Yitzchok, this is Klal Yisrael. This is Hashem speaking to the Jews. There's a sweet delicacy, sweet stuff. And then you have a bitter delicacy. Sour, like, hot sauce, whatever. Now, it's also, people enjoy that. Sour, a bitter taste, sharp taste. So, l'chayda, conceptually, sweet should be better than bitter, or sharp. Yet, God forbid, when somebody faints, you don't give him sugar to smell. You give him something sharp to smell. Yeah. Because only sharpness can wake up the neshama from fainting. So that's the same thing. The tzaddik is the sweet guy. Bittul b'metzias, only goody. The beinoni, he's fighting. That's sharp. But the Eibishter enjoys that more. So in other words, the sharp delicacy, in a certain respect, is much greater than the sweet delicacy, because that revives the soul. That gives the soul something that the sweet delicacy doesn't have.
It's the same thing in food.
And that's why Hashem created tzaddik and a Baal Tshuva. He has the enjoyment of a tzaddik. He has the enjoyment of a Baal Tshuva, of a beinoni.
Ashkenazim and Sephardim. Ashkenazim like sweet sugar.
Yeah. They put sugar in everything.
Sephardim like sharp,
lemon,
sour, olive, sour.
You don't expect me to comment, do you?
Yeah. Rabbi, beinoni, there are maybe 1% of the beinoni.
No. No. Beinoni? Maybe 0.0001.
Yeah, it's very even. And then tzaddikim is even less.
One per generation sometimes. Okay. Zel Mashakos of Haftarah. This is what the bottom of the paragraph, and that's what it says in the Haftarah in Parshas Vayigash. So again, until now, Yosef is greater. Lost the love of Yehuda is going to be greater, right? So it says over there, take one piece of wood, save all of the Yehuda. Okay, so it says like this in the Haftarah, what you're going to read this week. It says, take one wood and write Yehud on it. Take another piece of wood, write Yosef on it. And then Hashem says, bring them close to each other. And I'm going to put the Yehuda tree, the piece of wood, on top of the Yosef. And not only that, until the pasuk says, Va'avdi David melech aleihem. And David will be the king over both. So in other words, the Haftarah is speaking about the greatness of Yehuda. That now there's Taka Yosef and Yehuda take the two pieces of wood, Eitzachad, but I'm going to put Yehuda on top of Yosef. To the extent of Avdi David, Melech Alem, David is going to be the king. In other words, now Yosef's the king. Ultimately, David HaMelech is the king. Why? Because then La'asid Lavai, David HaMelech is greater. Pirish Ata Yosef Ulamayla Mi Yehuda Shanim Shalaris. Now Yosef is like greater than Yehuda because he's like the cedar tree. Asher Gadol V'Gaiva Misal Misleis V'Helech. And therefore Yosef has the 10 Shvatim. The 10 Shvatim are really from Yosef, connected to Yosef. The two tribes is Yehuda and Binyamin. So that's why over there it says, Shifte Yisrael Chaveirav, Nimtza Merube B'Shvatim Yosef Yehuda. Therefore now Hisafa, who has more? The 10 versus the 2. So number-wise, quantity-wise, they have more. Shal Shem Zayed Nikri Yosef Das Eliyah. Ach La'as Lavak Shiz Chaber Shneim Yosef V'Yehuda B'Yachad. B'Tachas HaYichud Amiti, when it will be the ultimate unity, Echad Be'echad Yigashu. V'Zeh Yal La'as Lavak, the real unity will be Mashiach comes, then Yehuda will be higher than Yosef, like it says, Eishes Chayal Teres Bible. So that's the difference between now and La'as Lavak. That's the difference between the Mishkan, which by the way was in Yosef, like we said, and the Beis HaMikdash, which is in the Chelek Yehuda. Okay, let's just finish the next few lines. So he says, that's what it says. Yosef couldn't hold himself back. He had to connect already to his brothers. Became one. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't get it. What do you mean became one?
Yosef